Good evening, Bills Mafia and NFL fans alike. Welcome to Buffalo Late Night. I am your host, Thomas DeLoss. This is now the sixth installment of Buffalo Late Night. We're glad that you could join us this evening. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the 2022 Buffalo Bills training camp, some key position battles, and a little bit of everything. Joining us tonight, we do have three very, very special guests, and I'm fairly confident that you're going to be quite familiar with them. One of them is running a tad bit late, but before that, we've got Matt Perino, who is the co-host of the Shout Buffalo podcast alongside Ryan Talbot, the Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com and a contributor for News Channel 4 out of Buffalo. And secondly, we've got Sal Mariano from who is a 36-year veteran for the Democrat and Chronicle out of Rochester, as well as the host of the Buffalo Bills Breakdown. I believe you're still doing that, correct, Sal?
No, I gave that up.
Oh, you gave that up. Okay, well, you can absolutely.
Like Perino blew me out of the business, so he actually cares about the podcast, so I let him do it.
Okay. But you can absolutely find him. He does some fantastic work, and I can tell you it's that good because my father-in-law, who is not a sports fan, knew who you were when I told him that you were going to be on tonight. So you're doing wonders if you can get his attention.
That only proves that I'm old. That's all that says.
So tonight we will be having Tim Graham join us momentarily. He's just running a tad behind. But one thing I did want to mention, and I've mentioned this a couple times so far, Buffalo Late Night is super excited that we are sponsored not only by a dentist for kids, which is my cousin, Zach Mills, Dr. Zach Mills, his practice, as well as Travis Matthew. And you'll hear more about them later on. Also, if you are watching, whether you're watching on Twitch or YouTube, feel free to comment. We love to hear what you have to say, whether it's Matt or Sal or Tim or myself. Feel free to jump right in that conversation. Let us know what you're thinking in regards to training camp, what you're excited about, who you're excited about, the return of training camp to Rochester. Just let's hear about it. But you can find us on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. But subscribe. Make sure you can get that content coming forward. Gentlemen, let's get right into this. First thing first, I want to send some best wishes to Kim Pegula, as well as the rest of the Pegula family. I know everybody's kind of on pins and needles right now. It's pretty tough when the kind of the patriarch of the Buffalo Bills is in a bad spot right now. So we're obviously sending our best wishes, hoping for a speedy recovery, especially for myself. She and I are both Fairport alums, so we're hoping for the best for her. But before I get into that, first things first, and I know this isn't about football, but Sal, I got to ask, do you think this New York Yankees team is going to beat the all-time win record of 114?
No, I don't. They're playing great right now, but their division's just too tough. They're going to end up getting, beating each other up, I think, as the season goes on. So I don't think they're going to get it, but I think they're going to win the division, and they're probably going to win 100. But I think 114 might be a stretch.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. They'd have to go on some serious runs. But, I mean, the one thing that's been different this year is their pitching's been outstanding.
Yeah, the no-hitter's up, by the way, so you got my full attention.
Well, I saw that. I was
of my attention. It's still a close game.
Right. What's funny is when him and Jamison Tyone actually had back-to-back perfect games, Garrett Cole lost it the same exact inning, right at the top of the eighth, or the bottom of the eighth, excuse me. Normally what I do is we go over some hot button topics real quick, not Bills related, just to kind of, bounce around the NFL. And so I got to ask you guys at this point, Deshaun Watson's camp is expecting a full season suspension. Do you think that's enough? Do you think that's the appropriate suspension for what he has done?
Well, for me, yeah. I mean, I think they've got to set a precedent here, right? I mean, we saw the Ray Rice suspension, and a couple others have been 4 or 6 games. This guy has done some pretty egregious stuff. And if these lawsuits keep rolling in like this, that's an awful lot of smoke around that fire. So I hope they do lay it down and set precedent here and give him the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, with each story that comes out, it gets worse and worse. And like I get it. Like there's a certain level. There's this camp that wants to kind of defend Deshaun Watson until like all of the sides of the story come out. But it's like every time he's had a chance to say anything on this, he's just left you kind of more puzzled with the entire operation that he's kind of been running with these massages. It's like professional athletes have pretty much anything available to them when it comes to their bodies. And so for just the way that these kind of went about and him seeking out all of these different women, it's just, I don't know, man, it just does not look good. And you're looking at, I think a massive, massive suspension. And then from there, it's like you look at the Cleveland Browns organization in general. Listen, I think the league is pissed at their team. I mean, to give this guy the contract that they gave him was, egregious across the league. Now I've talked to people in the league that say, it's not going to matter long term. I think when guys like Lamar Jackson and eventually Kyler Murray come out, it's just going to be like that was just one-off stupid decision by an organization. But man, there's looming precedents that have maybe been set here that are going to make a lot of this stuff down the road here after we move past whatever the suspension is for other teams in the way that people operate in the league. Just every part of this story has been ugly.
By the way, we got Tim Graham joining us. Tim, I'm going to give you your little introduction I have here. Tim Graham from The Athletic, as well as host of the Tim Graham and Friends podcast. Welcome.
I don't think he can hear you.
Needless to say, I agree with you, Matt. I think it's a situation that the NFL cannot they can't fumble through this again. They've done it time and time again with so many different situations. They've truly been unable to kind of take a grasp on bad situations in any situation. So I think they really have to lay the hammer down here. And if you don't, it's you're kind of putting all your female NFL fans on an island. Let's bounce right into the next one. Gotta ask, do you think the Ravens screwed the pooch in playing the waiting game with Lamar Jackson's contract?
I mean, I think that the whole situation is kind of odd because, first of all, you have Lamar Jackson who's kind of negotiating his own contract. So that kind of makes the entire thing different in and of itself. And, when it's the player, of course, I think that, he's going to want, to set the market, right? Lamar Jackson's a former MVP and he's done a lot in this league already. But if you're the Ravens and you're looking at, the long-term, the way that they build that thing, they do like to, be spenders in free agency or every few years. I know they do a lot of work in the draft and they've had a lot of success in the draft. But I think finding the right number is going to be something that, this is what it comes down to. And, me personally evaluating Lamar Jackson, I think the further away you get from that MVP season, I think the more negotiating power the Ravens actually have. He hasn't been great the last 2 years. I mean, 19, he was spectacular, right? The last couple of years, there's been a little bit of regression. And if you look at some of the guys that have signed their deals, recently, the two biggest ones, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they signed their deals as part of their ascension, right? Their statistical ascension, the success of their teams. It hasn't necessarily been that for Lamar. So I don't necessarily know that the Ravens have screwed the pooch, if you will. I think it's kind of a waiting game and, they're going to pay him regardless. And I think maybe going into next off season and figuring out if that's going to be when they lock him up, he's going to have to really, really prove it this year to get that super max contract. We'll see.
I don't think there's any chance in hell he's leaving Baltimore. They'll get it done. I mean, you're right, man. He hasn't played. He hasn't been MVP Lamar certainly the last couple of years, but I think the Ravens know that he's their franchise quarterback, and that's going to end up happening. I don't know what they're going to give him, if it's going to reach Allen Mahomes territory, but he's going to get his money and he's going to be with Baltimore for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I think the one thing that'll be interesting is the fact that he is representing himself, which I think is one of very few NFL players that don't have an agent. So it will be intriguing to see how he, navigates through this, but he's he's done well so far, but yeah, I agree. His actual talent hasn't lived up to that MVP season. And then finally, before we get into the training camp talk, knowing the expectations of this, the season for the Bills, how long of a leash do you guys believe Ken Dorsey gets with the offensive play calling before someone with more experience like a Joe Brady or an Aaron Kromer get to actually take over so that the season doesn't go off the rails?
Oh, I think he's got quite a long leash. I also don't think that Joe Brady, he may as well have the same amount of experience as Ken Dorsey because it did not go well for him in Carolina. So from a play calling perspective, he doesn't have some, somewhere where he was super successful in that role. And he's in a different role. He's going to be, primarily working with Josh Allen. That's going to be his major role. And I think with Dorsey, he's going to lean on a couple of guys, right? Obviously, Aaron Kromer has that experience. But they also brought in Mike Shula, who was the offensive coordinator for Ken back in Carolina when he was the quarterbacks coach there for Cam Newton. So Tim would probably be the best person to ask about this. He just put out a really cool story. Talked to a few people about what Ken is facing. But in terms of a leash, I think that there's enough talent on this offense and continuity to kind of keep it rolling. But you're right. If it really struggles coming out of the gates, it's going to be a talking point. It's going to be something that we're asking Ken about, asking Sean about every week.
Yeah, I have no worries right now about Ken Dorsey. If they had gone outside the organization and really changed things up, which I think would have been stupid, then I think we have some legitimate concerns about what might happen. I think Allen could probably adapt to probably anybody in that role. But the fact that it's Dorsey and they're really keeping a lot of this offense the same, Allen's talked about the terminology and all that. I just think it's going to be a seamless transition. Maybe I'm being an optimist, which is rare for me, but I just don't see it being a big problem that anybody should be worried about. Now, if we get halfway through the season and this offense is, doing terribly, then maybe you question some things. But as far as a leash goes, Ken Dorsey's the coordinator, and that's not changing this season, no matter how it goes.
Tim, did you hear the question?
Well, I know what you're talking about. I didn't hear the actual question. I don't want to repeat things that have already been said or get too repetitive. So feel free to ask me a question that steers it away from what's already been said, so I can maybe add something new, which would be odd in and of itself.
So in regards to Ken Dorsey, and I know you wrote an article in regards to kind of what he's going to be going through, the plights of a first-year offensive coordinator. Do you believe he has anything going for him that could, be unlike other offensive coordinators that are on their first run?
You mean something positive?
Yeah.
No. I don't get a sense that Ken Dorsey's ready to reinvent the wheel. And we see that it took an awful long time for Brian Daboll to be considered a genius. And that's not to say that he had a Josh Allen at his disposal when he was in Miami and Cleveland and Kansas City. But you need to find your rhythm. And I do think it does take some time. And I interviewed 4 former offensive coordinators who are also head coaches. 3 of them were very confident that Ken Dorsey would be just fine. But the 4th one, who called me after the story was completed, we weren't able to talk. So I ended up writing a second story, was Kevin Gilbride, who also had his ups and downs. And it depends on who your quarterback is, of course. And I think that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and the infrastructure that's already in place, the cultural infrastructure, I should say, from Sean McDermott, I think that's going to carry them through until Ken Dorsey can find his sea legs. So I'm optimistic, but I do think it would be naive to think that it will be totally smooth. They're going to run into some problems. And we saw that there was friction between Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll, as great as Brian Daboll was, and it rolling up yards and points and winning a lot of games. Brian Daboll would get short, or I'm sorry, Sean McDermott would get short regarding Brian Daboll and his lack of running. So does Ken Dorsey have that long leash that Brian Daboll earned from having all those offensive coordinator stops? Here you now have a rookie play caller doing it at the offensive level. or I'm sorry, doing it at the NFL level. And is he going to be able to figure things out in split second decisions? Yeah, he's used to it. He's done, as Sean McDermott likes to say, he's seen the game through the helmet. He's been on the headset throughout his entire time with the Bills and even with the Panthers. He knows the rhythm of a play call, when you need to stop talking because the headset cuts off, all that stuff. But you still have to be able to think. It's different when you're the guy that has to come up with the next play, as opposed to just listening to somebody else do it.
Yeah, and on top of it, now that Josh Allen is in his 5th year, you're seeing Josh Allen has a lot more confidence. The offense runs through Josh, and he strikes plays if he doesn't like them, and he encourages plays if he does. So I think it's not, it's like Dable in his 2nd year was, kind of tentative because Josh was learning on the fly with Brian Dable as well. So it was a little bit more difficult. But I think now that Josh has a good rhythm, I think it can actually play to Dorsey and help him out along the way too. I just want to do a live read real quick. A Dentist for Kid offers individual dental treatment for kids of all ages. By providing a relaxed, fun, and encouraging environment, Dr. Zach's goal is to help your child build confidence in their smile and with their overall dental health. A Dentist for Kids is currently accepting new patients, and they participate with most major insurances. If you visit Dr. Zach, mention Buffalo Late Night for $25 off your choice of a custom whitening kit or an electric toothbrush. Call today to set up an appointment with Dr. Zach and his team. 585-538-7230. So, gentlemen, moving into the actual meat and potatoes of tonight's show. We're talking about training camp, and I had mentioned to both Sal and Matt before. Let's kind of get into this. Do any of you guys have a favorite memory from training camp of any of the years that you guys have covered to this point?
No, I don't have any favorite memories. I have a lot of memories and, things that have happened through the years. And like you said, before we went on the air, I go back to, Fredonia in the early 90s with the Super Bowl teams. And training camp was, it was a lot different back then. And it was a lot more enjoyable too, because we had relationships with the players back then, the team before free agency. There wasn't a lot of turnover. You got to know these guys. Nowadays, first of all, the players don't care about the media guys at all anymore. There's no relationships there. People can pretend there are, but there aren't really. They don't care about us. Back then, you did have relationships. And I saw Kelly and Bruce and Thurman and Andre in the bars in Fredonia after practice at night. We would shoot the shit, and it was all fun and dandy. It was a good time seeing the players ride around in golf carts on the Fredonia campus, and it was just good back then. Over at Fisher, it's become more homogenized, and it's all about keeping the players secluded and away from us as much as possible. So all my good memories are, back when Marv was the coach and they were in Fredonia. Fisher's been great for me because it's 15 minutes from my house, so I appreciate it. But all my fun times were back in Fredonia.
For sure.
Well, while we're on that topic, if I can ask Sal a question. Marv was known for being a little light with his players in terms of putting them through the physical rigors that were so common back then. He was obviously a pioneer because it's been the way Marv approached it is now pretty much written into the collective bargaining agreement. But what was that like when Marv took over as a writer, having seen nutcracker drills and two-a-days with heavy contact, to go from that to Marv, where he was, we're gonna go through all that stuff on the field when the games count. We're going to save you guys. And again, genius at the time, genius for the time, but he took a lot of criticism for that too.
Oh, he did. People wanted, before he was there, Hank Bullitt was there, and he was the rockhead, knucklehead, type of head football coach from the 50s and 60s, and he had, or 60s and 70s, and he had a certain way of doing things. And Marv came in with this cerebral approach and using his big words and his light workouts, and it was a breath of fresh air for the players for sure. They loved Marv immediately because he treated them like men, first of all, but he also understood the rigors of the game and that you couldn't blow your wad in July and August. You had to save a little bit of that for when their season actually began. So they really appreciated it. And those guys today, to this day, they worship the ground that Marv walked on. And for us media guys, look, he was great to deal with. Marv is still my favorite coach of all time. Just a really good guy. He was a liar a lot of the time. He started jingling the change in his pockets if he was going to lie to us, and we all had the tells. But that's the way it was, and it's always the way it's going to be too. But he was a great guy to deal with, cerebral, great quote, and just a nice man too, which is, makes our job easier. Sean doesn't say anything, but Sean's a nice man. I enjoy the interaction with Sean. He's a good guy. And really, since Marv, I think Sean's probably my next favorite coach that I've covered.
You didn't like Rex?
Well, Rex was fun. He was, kind of a dipshit, but he was fun. Good quote.
Speaking of Rex, actually, I got to ask you, Tim. Kevin Gilbride, I believe he was the one that got in the fist fight with Buddy Ryan, correct?
Well, Buddy threw a punch at Kevin. I don't know that Kevin punched back, but that's the one. Also, the offensive coordinator for the Houston Oilers when they lost the comeback game, and a lot of it was, and I mentioned it in the story, he couldn't get out of the offense. That was the offense that they ran. They built up a big lead, and that was their run and shoot is what they kept doing. They didn't have another gear, and that was a young offensive coordinator with all this firepower, and they started to get a little wobbly, and all that time that was left on the clock from throwing the ball and refusing to run it is what allowed the Bills to come back and win that game.
I like it. Matt, what do you have any things you remember from training camp of the past that sticks out to you?
So for me, I think it's kind of like Sal, like it all kind of meshes together. But what I will say is the last 2 years without it, like just the availability and the we did training camp last year at the stadium and no fans. And it was very kind of the way that it's evolved. It's very hard to do the job in the way that it's been throughout the pandemic, especially with the players, but even from a reporting perspective. There's certain guidelines, and now with the practices being open, that's going to open up the game a little bit more for reporters as well. And just being at the facility at St. John Fisher, walking on the field after practice and being able to maybe talk to players. It's Tim and Sal could tell you about it. It's kind of like a ping pong game, right? Like everybody's kind of bouncing around in different areas at the college. And as a reporter, you're kind of trying to, get as many of them as you can to try to, do the stories that you're trying to do. And I think that environment with fans back and all the restrictions lifted, for me, that is going to be exciting to see what now in year 5 for me on the beat. Like those first 2 years at Fisher, those were my first 2 years, very important years where you're kind of just learning the ropes a lot of ways. And luckily for me, I've had a lot of people that have helped me on that path. And one of them is actually returning to Buffalo, which I'm super excited about. Matthew Fairburn, who had the job before me. He's covering the Sabres now. And so to have that back, we've talked about that on the beat. I think a lot of us are looking forward to that, even though, like Sal mentioned, nobody's really giving you the inside scoop or anything like that, but just having conversations, getting to know people a little bit deeper, it'll be helpful.
Absolutely. And Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
No. My favorite memories of training camp are trying to find a patch of shade with Sal Majorana. We both have an aversion to the sun, and we also have an agreement that we generally don't give a shit about what's going on the field because we don't know what the hell we're looking at. You can do your observations and all that stuff, but we're so restricted in some of the things that we're allowed to say and report. Mini camp, we weren't allowed to say who's working with what units, and so we generally just monitor. We make sure that we don't miss somebody, breaking an ankle. That Troy Vincent isn't going to deliver a late hit on JP Lossman, or Aaron Maben and Eric Wood aren't going to get into a fist fight. That's kind of what we do. And we monitor a few things, try to come up with some story ideas. But we don't need to be down there, right there on the sideline. We'll have a tendency to find a patch of shade and watch from there.
Hey, nothing against the guys who do it, and God bless them. But if you ever see me charting plays in a practice, especially a no pads, in shorts, no pass rush practice, just shoot me on the spot, Tim. Seriously, just put me out of my misery if you ever catch me doing that.
Well, I'll check on you first. It'll be like a check the welfare type
Okay.
situation because I'm going to find out why you're doing it before
It's got to be heat stroke at that point, right?
Right. I want to make sure you're all right. I might need to give you some cool towels or something.
Listen, don't let Sal fool you, though. He comes with all this bluster, but this guy is a super softy. He just got himself a new dog today. I saw the pictures of Mickey, beautiful little pooch. What is he, a golden doodle? I
Little
love
mini
it.
golden doodle, little 15-pound football eventually.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
just wait. One of my best friends has a golden doodle. His wife wanted a dog for the first time. She's an overnight nurse. Now he's got a young child that he's watching all day long.
What did a mini golden doodle run you, Sal? That's an expensive dog.
Yeah, it was about. Actually, it wasn't bad. It only cost us $1,000. I thought it was going to cost more. We got it at a breeder over here in Canada.
Only
Only
$1,000.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't bad. They were 2,000-3,000. Some of these places.
Wow.
They are expensive
Magic
dogs. I
Sperm or something. I don't know what that was, but
I looked into them myself. It's they're gouging you on the no allergy. You know, they
That's
don't
it.
shed.
Yep.
A low dander dog, and they made it mini for you.
they
You don't
did.
even have to get the big one. They downsized it for you, so you got to pay extra for that.
I don't know how the mini poodle and the golden retriever get on. I mean, that's got to be something to see, but I'm glad I don't have to see it. I like the result though. The result was good.
I'll tell you, next time around when I get another dog, which I don't want to wish my dog away, but between my wife, my cat, and my dog, there's so much shedding in this house. I'm losing my mind. And then you got pollen season on top of it, and my allergies are losing it.
A lot of shedding of tears in the Graham household.
Love it. I love it. Tim, I like your quips. So let's bounce right in. So the Bills, obviously, they have one of the deepest teams in terms of their franchise, not only in their history, but in the NFL. Not only that, but many UFA or UDFAs didn't even want to sign here after the draft, just purely based on lack of opportunity. I know for myself, I'm excited for the running back group because I just want to see James Cook, see what kind of role they're going to put him in. Because I know with JD McKissick, they had some ideas for what they wanted as potentially Singletary's backup. But I'm intrigued to see, how they sprinkle him in, if he's going to get a bigger role, kind of a complementary role, or maybe just kind of, use as a third down or, off play type of running back. So what I want to know is there a specific position battle or a player or both that you guys are looking forward to, and why is that?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm really interested in wide receiver. I think you're set at your top two, right? Like Gabriel Davis is going to be that wide receiver 2 definitively now. But after that, it's very interesting. They brought in Jamison Crowder, who I think fits what they've had in Cole Beasley the last couple of years. But the Bills last year kind of moved away from that type of receiver. Isaiah McKenzie has had some pretty explosive games in the slot, but there's also now this missing component that Gabriel Davis has filled the last couple of years of like that do everything kind of guy, can kind of be that third receiver, be that guy that fills in for one of the top 2 receivers when somebody's out, but just make plays when you're not given a whole bunch to make. And so if they want to like go with those big 4 right there, you're set. And then after that, I think there's a lot of talent. I think, Isaiah Hodgins, this is a very big year for him. He's coming into his 3rd season. Marquez Stevenson, he's supposed to be this deep threat. So it's going to be fun to watch some of these guys in training camp, see how they can. And Jake Kumro, I think he's going to be on this team any way that you shake it. He plays special teams. They really like him a lot. And so I think from a position battles standpoint, by the way, you got to fit in the rookie Khalil Shakir. There's a lot of interesting ways they can kind of dice this thing up, because you look at the 53-man roster right now and how many players are going to keep at certain positions. I think 9 is pretty much probably a lock on the defensive line, barring any big injuries. They kept 11 last year. So that's 2 roster spots that open up that you can kind of get interesting with. And Ken Dorsey, if he wants a couple extra weapons, Chad Hall goes to bat for a wide receiver or 2. It wouldn't be surprising to me if they keep 7 wide receivers in this group to put weapons, different flavors around Josh Allen.
Yeah, I'll have to be boring and say the same thing. Wide receiver is going to be super interesting. I don't, offensive line will be interesting, but who cares? I mean, you're not watching the offensive line that closely in training camp. At least I'm not. Wide receiver, you can see things happening, and there's going to be, I think, some really interesting choices they're going to have to make. Marquez Stevenson is a guy that, what's he going to do? I mean, last year he made the team. If he can't be the return guy, I don't see a place for him. Is Tavon Austin going to get that spot? That'll be interesting. I'm dying to see what Shakir does. When the pads come out, he was a great, he was a very good player in college. Did a lot of things, competitiveness and all that stuff that the scouts talked about. I'm really interested to see if they've got another 4th round steal like they had with Davis with Shakir. So I'll be watching that pretty closely. And then, of course, the big battle for backup quarterback, Matt. Come on. Can Matt Barkley make a run at Case Keenum? You need to know.
I think that position, that depth chart's settled. I think. I don't think the Bills need to worry about anybody swiping Matt Barkley off their practice squad.
And you know what? Doesn't Matt Barkley have the greatest life on the face of the earth? I mean, think about it, right? He is the practice squad quarterback for a Super Bowl team, beautiful wife, USC legend, lives on Ventura Beach in the offseason. I mean, I want to be Matt Barkley, guys. I want to lose 80 pounds and be Matt Barkley.
That's great.
He's got some good dance moves too. He's got the swinging of the coat. That's legendary. Actually, I think he redid that for the Bills this season.
Good golfer too.
He's iconic.
Is he a good golfer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tim.
he won the media tournament.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Nate Geary. That's right. Nate's gonna live that one forever.
Yeah, it's the first thing Nate Geary said on my radio hit with him on Saturday. And I said, Nate, you play golf more than I think any of us do any one thing. If you didn't win, I feel like it would have been something that we've talked about forever. But
Who else has won in the past? We know Jerry Sullivan won the first one. And so is there some sort of golf curse, perhaps? So who won the other ones?
About 40 strokes to win that one, didn't he?
Yes.
Be nice. I never used to get strokes when I played, when I was good. Jerry was probably getting 30 that day.
Hey, he's a champion.
He is.
Bean and Skursky won it a couple years ago. They broke up that team this year. So, yeah.
I've heard Brandon
Barkley's
Bean's
really
a
good.
bit of a ringer, isn't he?
Bean's
No, he's
really
not a
good.
ringer. He's just a flat out good stick. Yeah, he's a good player. I played with Sean. The only time I played in that, I played with Sean, and I played lousy that day too.
How did Sean play?
Sean played lousier, but
Yeah, I think he's been working on his game. Apparently, I've heard.
So he had an excuse. I didn't.
So, Tim, do you have any specific training camp battles or anything in terms of specific players that you're kind of going to be focusing on?
Well, I think the offensive line, again, I'm like Sal in that regard, and I'm the first to admit it's really difficult for the layman to know exactly what you're looking at when it comes to offensive line play. But I want to see how Aaron Cromer's unit shakes out and how his players do too, while we're at it. That was a joke for you, Perino. That was just I don't know. I thought that would get some laughs. I'm sorry. Sorry for working blue on everybody here and taking everybody by surprise. But I'd like to see how Aaron Cromer does. There's a lot of interchange. I don't want to say interchangeable parts because that's disrespectful, but we have a lot of moving parts on that offensive line. It'll be important for those guys to come forward as with some clear and definitive roles. Coming out of training camp, especially for Josh Allen with his new offensive coordinator. And, the things that aren't going to change too much in terms of, I think, the way Aaron Cromer coaches the offensive linemen, because those protections need to stay fairly the same. You want Josh Allen to be able to make the call that he's used to and to know what his offensive linemen are going to be doing. And too much radical change there will just make things that much trickier at the start of the season. Cornerback, What's going to happen? How are these guys going to play? How are they going to be used until Tre'Davious White can come back? Kaiir Elam, of course, as the top pick, but we also know that Sean McDermott notoriously is distrustful of rookies. No matter what their pedigree is, they have very short leashes. They are worked in a little bit more than they're thrown in. But he may need to be thrown in because the loss of Levi Wallace and et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be a huge position to watch in training camp for me there. I just want to mention about receiver. I do believe that they are obviously very full at that position. I am not sold on Jamison Crowder being any kind of cure. And I know that that's the temptation when you have a free agent coming in that, they've identified this guy's going to be great. Well, granted, he didn't have Josh Allen throwing him the ball, but he was a very important part of the Jets offense for a long time, a team that was throwing often, throwing from behind, and doesn't have a ton of production. I mean, it's not like you're looking at a plug and play situation where he's all right, that's Cole Beasley, or, you're talking about the slot position and Isaiah McKenzie's role and what's going to happen there. Tavon Austin is some kind of, may have a role in that, in that slot position, or obviously Khalil Shakir. So what happens in the slot, maybe more so than the receiver position, but what happens in the slot, I'll be focused on.
Yeah, I'll tell you, with Kaiir Elam, it's intriguing to see if he is able to make that jump right out of the gate. I know Dane Jackson has shown he can do a really nice job, when he's come in Levi Wallace or for, Tre'Davious, he's done a nice job. And he's stepped up. He's played really, really consistent ball, which, when it comes to Sean McDermott, it's consistency. I mean, that he bangs that drum every day. And I think that if he has, one guy that he can lean on all the time, I think that's potentially what he could do. And he's going to make Kaiir Elam, earn that position 100%. And I agree that I think the wide receiver position is going to be intriguing. Tim, I kind of lean on your side with Jamison Crowder. I mean, Jamison Crowder has had a ton of soft tissue injuries throughout his career, has not been consistent in terms of, healthiness. And I mean, Sean, again, going back to the Sean McDermott thing, he has preached, availability is one of the best traits, and that'll earn yourself a real quick, I mean, aside from fumbles, earn yourself a real quick, seat on the bench for anybody. So it'll be intriguing to see what he does.
Or being off the team. And I know that nobody can come out and say it, but you notice a lot of the people who were really against getting vaccinated, a high percentage of those guys aren't back. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
And sure, we're not getting into the same protocols either, but I'm sure Sean McDermott, hey, let me point something else out too. Because I found this to be an interesting question, I guess, about being availability. I don't want to start anything here.
Yeah,
but
sure you do. You do.
No, I think it was interesting, but nobody necessarily wants to say anything because everybody loves Josh Allen, and he's a superstar, and he's doing all these cool things. John Wara of the Associated Press asked Sean McDermott a question at his news conference a few days ago. Well, last week it was. And he talked about how impressive Josh Allen's commitment to the team is, that after he played in the match, he took a red-eye flight back from the match so that way he could be at practice the next day. And Sean McDermott handled that question somewhat diplomatically. He did not agree that it was necessarily commitment. And I think the reason is because Sean McDermott probably wanted to say commitment would have been if he didn't play in the match and was at practice that day. And he made it a point to say, well, now's the time to get all that stuff out of the way. I'm glad that my players are getting these opportunities to do these fun things. And he kind of sidestepped it. But I think that, that whole thing about commitment was probably a charged word, and maybe not exactly the right one, because I think that I immediately thought I said commitment would have been not playing in the match, quite frankly. But I didn't want to who's to quibble? I guess me right now.
Always stirring up shit, aren't you?
No, I think it's fine. I just think it's interesting that the question was asked, yeah, it is. It is pretty cool that he didn't blow off the second day of practice. But he wouldn't have needed to be so committed if he had been at practice that day.
Well, I would say that I was okay with Allen going and doing what he was doing.
I was too. I was just bringing up an observation. It was just an observation on the question.
Camp practice, which we all know are useless. And I think Sean, if you put a lie detector test on him, he'd say the same thing. He basically did say it on that press conference. He said, when the real football starts in training camp, he knows this is all a bunch of BS.
Well, that's why teams always cancel the last practice or even the whole mini camp sometimes. Sean McDermott,
he wouldn't have canceled practice.
Sean McDermott spent that practice bullshitting on the side. I can't remember who it was with. Well, there was one of the OTAs. Luke Kuechly was there, and Sean McDermott wasn't even watching what was going on the field. Now, granted, he can go back and watch the tape if he wants to bad enough, but that was the day that Josh Allen wasn't there. And so Sean just stood there with Brandon Beane and shot the shit with Luke Kuechly.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders if it's almost tongue in cheek, though. I mean, if he says that knowing that Josh is going to hear it, if he's almost just like razzing Josh, knowing, hey, you didn't show up to practice for 2 days to be at the match. I mean, I agree, Tim. I think Sean is very trite and specific to what he says, and he's kind of like an army general in terms of like exactly how he wants things to a T. I guess he could go at his star quarterback. It'd be an intriguing method to get the rest of the team to fall in line for sure.
I think something super interesting about this dynamic moving forward is how it's going to evolve between Josh and Sean, because their relationship has been interesting the last couple of years, right? Like Josh has been this happy-go-lucky, just dying to make it, prove himself, right? And Sean's been like the father figure, right? But eventually, Josh is going to become, I mean, he already is this superstar. That's going to, that whole thing is going to continue to evolve as he gets bigger. Like that relationship between the two of them, I think is something that, it's going to be more of this, what Tim's talking about, like kind of reading between the lines over what they say and how they say it. Like last year, one thing about Ken Dorsey that I think is interesting is like last year, Dable was the no doubt about it CEO of the offense. So the back and forth between Sean McDermott and the offense was with Sean McDermott and Dable. Eventually, that could kind of morph into Sean McDermott and Josh Allen as he kind of really owns this offense even more. And I'm not trying to downplay Dorsey's impact or how he'll control things as the CEO. But I just think as Josh Allen's star continues to rise, he'll kind of maybe insert himself as one of those top tier quarterbacks, a la Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. And those things are going to be really interesting because I almost feel like if you're Sean, you got to treat that whole thing with kid gloves.
Sean McDermott he would probably be smart to understand that his future is tied to Josh Allen more than vice versa. Probably. I do think that Josh Allen, especially when it comes to, fan sentiment, he is the franchise now. It's not Sean McDermott anymore. And I think that that's happened not just overnight, that was last season too. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott both have publicly admitted, and they're not even coy about it, that it was paramount this offseason to keep Josh Allen happy when they lost Shea Tierney as the assistant quarterbacks coach, in addition to Brian Dable, Davis Webb, who they were willing to make their quarterbacks coach, again, to keep Josh Allen happy. They lose Mitchell Trubisky, another part of the safety net. Yes, they bring back Matt Barkley and they promote Ken Dorsey, but there's an admission by the organization that we need Josh to be happy. Well, to what extent? To what extent is he allowed to be happy? How much is he going to have say in calling the plays? We know that the organization does not like Josh Allen running the ball as much as he does. But if Josh wants to run it, is Josh going to run it? So there's an interesting. It's very, very insightful that you bring that up, Matt, because that's something that I've kind of thought about, but not in the way that you said it. But yeah, I think that you're right. We are going to hear more from Josh. We're going to rely more on what Josh Allen has to say about the offense than we did with Brian Dable on Mondays.
Yeah, and inherently, I think with Josh Allen and even with Sean McDermott, they're PR geniuses too. So no matter what, I mean, we're going to have to read the tea leaves to try to figure out exactly what's going on. But they're going to literally salsa dance around to whatever question is asked, because I mean, you look at Josh and you ask him a question, he is so suave with answering anything that is thrown his way, and he spins it the perfect direction. I mean, he's very, very good at what he does. Now, wanted to do one more live read real quick. Travis Matthews, Innovative Fabrics, keep you looking and feeling your best, whether you're on the golf course or strolling through town, offering supreme comfort for every aspect of your life. With clothing that's quick drying, wrinkle resistant, and super soft, you can move seamlessly from work to play. Get 20% off your first order at travismatthew.com. You'll find the link right on Buffalo Late Night social media pages. So to finish this off, gentlemen, finally speaking about camp being in Rochester, which for anybody that's watching, if you have not been to camp in Rochester, I highly suggest it. Many national pundits speak to this, other GMs, other coaches. They have said Rochester has one of the best training camps, or the Bills have one of the best training camps at St. John Fisher in Rochester. The layout's fantastic. It's super fan friendly. And they do a real nice job. They make it so they encourage it. Obviously, it's getting shorter and shorter, but try to get out there and see it. But my question is to you guys, what are your feelings on the location, and what do you think is the outcome of training camp in the future?
Well, the location is great for me, so that's all that matters, right? No, look, that's an ideal setup. No matter what anybody says, it is a great place to have training camp for a couple weeks. And I think the Bills, and McDermott and Bean, we used to think it was lip service, but I think they really do mean it. I think they do like to go away for a couple weeks. They keep these guys, pretty penned up at Fisher for those 2 weeks. And I think they like the camaraderie, everybody's there. It's all football all the time. I think it's a good thing. And I think the Bills will realize that. And I don't know if they're going to sign a long-term deal. Bean had said way back at the combine, before they even finalized this year, that maybe they would just do it on a year-to-year basis, maybe even rotate it 1 year in Orchard Park, 1 year at Fisher. But I don't think the Bills are going to be done with Fisher after this year. I think they appreciate going there, and they get taken care of pretty well. So I think we're going to see more camps at Fisher.
I was surprised how many open practice dates they had, because that's been something they've really tried to limit. And I think last year, even the way that they set things up, it would have been hard to have a lot of fans there anyway. Like at the stadium, it just doesn't work really. They'd have to put bleachers like over the fences. Like it just wouldn't work. But I think that they do kind of like that. I mean, the reporting guidelines they're really strict. I mean, there's some around the league that are stricter, but not many. And so now with 11 open practices, 12 if you count the red and blue game, like you're going to start seeing like all the videos back. Remember Josh's rookie year when some of those videos of the overthrows went viral? Like they're going to start, all that stuff's going to be out there again with all these open practices. So that was, from my perspective, that's why I thought a long, like 3-week camp in Fisher, I didn't see that. I thought maybe like a week, couple practices, but this is full fledged, right back to what it was before. I'm all for it, but I was a little bit surprised about it.
I'm eager to see what the crowds are going to be like, because over the years, and this would include even some of the McDermott, Josh Allen era, they'd continued to dwindle, but there has been no access for fans the last couple of years. Excuse me. And since the airport welcoming surge has happened with the Bills, and that's become a thing, if you're going to go out and see them at the airport when they get back from a week 13 loss or whatever it was, then maybe we're going to see a little bit more fanaticism with these guys. These guys have become, I think, since the fans have been away, rock stars. You don't have that 2 year ago. Well, we're really not sure. We like Josh Allen. We know he's good, but is he going to be great? Well, since the fans have been gone from these events, he's become great, and he's maybe the best quarterback in the NFL. And we have, the Stephon Diggs show and all these other, I mean, there are so many things that have happened since fans have been away for training camp that it'll be, I'd like to see a huge spike compared to where things were a couple of years ago. It would be right. It would be proper.
Yeah, I mean, last year when they did the practice at the stadium, the amount of fans there were fantastic. Same thing for the preseason games. Fans, I mean, they came out in droves. But I agree. I think the lack of training camp, and specifically the lack of training camp in Rochester, is probably going to drive numbers. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to go back to, probably 2015, 2016, when numbers were pretty high. I wouldn't be surprised at that point. That's what I got for you, gentlemen. I truly appreciate you guys. Well,
you had three of the best.
You guys are three of the best.
Absolutely.
You
had three of the people who cover the Bills. We're three of them.
We are three.
Love it. Well, guys, can you, if you want to go ahead and plug yourself where people can find you?
Whoa.
You can find me in hell, right, boys? You always can find me.
Find me in a patch of shade standing next to Sal.
Yeah.
Sal, where
usually using Sal for the shade.
What'd you say?
Standing in Sal's shadow. His immense shadow.
It is a big shadow these days. You can fit a few of you guys behind me now.
Sal, where can they get how can they get on the Yankees newsletter?
The Yankees newsletter. That's I shine there. The hell with this bill. I shine on my Yankees newsletter. They have to just DM me their email address, and you will get me basically covering the Yankees. I put a newsletter out after each series the next morning. It's been really pretty well received, so I've enjoyed that. So yeah, I'd rather plug that than my newspaper, to be honest with you.
The Yankees just picked up their 50th win.
They just did. They just closed it out.
Matt, Tim, where can people find you?
Follow me on Twitter @ByTimGraham. I was trying to put that in my name like you have up there, Thomas, but I couldn't figure it out. I had trouble enough with the audio on this thing. See, Matt Perino's got his down there. @ByTimGraham. That's BY Tim Graham. Don't misspell that first word. You'll get something else.
I'm at Matt Perino, Syracuse.com, obviously, for all our coverage. Shout Podcast, and don't miss TGAF either. He didn't plug it in there, but it is it's one of my favorite listens.
Thank you. So, Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by I can't give ads on it. I'm sorry, but it rolls right. I get started. I get a little momentum. I can't stop. Tim Graham and Friends, twice a week usually.
Fantastic. Well, guys, again, truly appreciate you guys coming on tonight. For everybody who's been watching, this has been Buffalo Late Night. You can now not only find us, obviously, where you're watching it live, but you can find it on all podcasting platforms, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music. Feel free to download and re-listen to this. Some really good content. And again, go follow these guys. These are three, and I truly believe this. I said this earlier, three of the best in the business of what you guys do. Truly some, interesting, quirky, really strong information. And, they bring it every single day, and they do it because they love it. So again, this has been Buffalo Late Night. I am Thomas DeLoss. You can find me at the Thomas DeLoss. Truly appreciate you guys watching, and go Bills.
See you guys.
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on and shout. Yeah, 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 yeah. Say you will. Shout it right now, baby. Say you will. Come on, come on. Say you will. Come on and shout. Say you will. Yeah. Buffalo's happening now. We're on the move now. The Bills are happening now. They're making it happen now. Got the spirit, a lot of spirit, yeah.